Imagine standing in the thick, humid heart of the Florida Everglades in the early 1990s. The air is heavy with the scent of sawgrass and swamp water, but something crucial is missing. The silence is heavy because the top of the food chain has essentially been erased. At that moment, scientists realized they were looking at a biological ghost. There were only about 12 Florida panthers left on the entire planet that were capable of breeding. Not 1,200, not a few hundred, 12. This beautiful, tawny predator, which once ruled the entire southeastern United States, had been pushed into a tiny, swampy corner of South Florida, and the genes inside those last few survivors were failing. They were suffering from heart defects, undescended testicles, and strange cowlicks in their fur, all classic signs of extreme inbreeding. The Florida panther wasn't just disappearing. Its own DNA was turning against it. But then Florida did something so controversial, so legally risky, and so biologically radical that it changed conservation history forever. They didn't just build a fence or protect a forest. They staged a high-stakes genetic heist that involved flying mountain lions from thousands of miles away to save a sinking ship. What happened next is a transformation so dramatic it has become the gold standard for how we save species in the 21st century. Today we are diving into the incredible rescue of the Florida panther and the genetic miracle that brought a legend back from the literal edge of nothingness. To understand why this was such a massive deal, you have to look at what happens to a species when its gene pool becomes a puddle. For decades, the Florida panther was isolated. Roads, farms, and cities cut them off from their cousins in the West. This isolation is a genetic trap. Imagine a library where you keep copying the same 5 books over and over again. Eventually, mistakes creep into the text. Pages go missing. The stories stop making sense. This is what was happening to the panther. By 1995, every single panther born in the wild had a hole in its heart or a skeletal deformity. They were essentially a living museum of genetic errors. Most experts at the time said it was over. They predicted the panther would be gone by the turn of the millennium. The conventional wisdom was to let them fade away with dignity. But the people on the ground, the biologists who spent their lives tracking these cats through the mud, refused to accept that. They came up with a plan that sounded like madness at the time. It was called genetic introgressions. The idea was to take 8 female cougars from Texas and drop them into the Florida Everglades. Now, to a regular person, a cougar and a panther look pretty much the same. But to a federal regulator or a purist biologist, this was like mixing oil and water. There were massive legal battles. People argued that by bringing in Texas cats, they were destroying the purity of the Florida panther. They said the resulting kittens wouldn't be true Florida panthers anymore. But the counter-argument was simple. Would you rather have a slightly mixed panther or a completely pure pile of bones? After years of debating, the plan was finally greenlit. It was a race against the biological clock. In 1995, those 8 Texas cougars were released into the Florida wilderness, and this is where the story gets fascinating. The Texas females didn't just survive, they thrived. They found the remaining Florida males, and the 2 groups began to mix. Within just a few years, the genetic miracle started to unfold. The first generation of mixed kittens was born, and the physical changes were immediate. The heart defects vanished. The skeletal problems disappeared. The cowlicks in the fur, which had been a sign of inbred weakness, started to fade away. They were stronger, faster, and more resilient than their parents had been in generations. It was as if someone had taken those 5 old, tattered books in the library and suddenly brought in 100 new volumes. The story of the Florida panther was being rewritten in real time. What Florida did next was focus on the landscape. They realized that you can't have a healthy panther population if they are trapped in a biological island. So the state began one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in the history of the South. They started building wildlife underpasses. If you drive across Alligator Alley today, you'll see high fences and bridges that look like they go over nothing. But underneath those bridges are specialized corridors that allow panthers to move between habitats without having to cross 4 lanes of high-speed traffic. This changed everything. It turned the isolated pockets of swamp into a continuous highway of wilderness. The panthers started to move north. They started to reclaim forests they hadn't stepped foot in since the 1950s. But the real shocker came when the researchers looked at the numbers. From those final 12 survivors and the 8 Texas newcomers, the population exploded. It went from a dozen to 50, then 100. And today, estimates suggest there are over 200 panthers roaming the state. But it's not just about the number of animals. It's about the quality of the life they are leading. Because their DNA has been refreshed, these cats are capable of massive migrations. We've seen individual panthers travel all the way from the southern tip of the state up towards the Georgia border. This is a level of vitality that was unthinkable 30 years ago. What Florida created wasn't just a survival story. It was a revival story. The Texas 8, as they are now known in the halls of biology, became the mothers of a new dynasty. Interestingly, the study of their impact has changed how we look at endangered species laws. Before this, the law was very rigid about pure subspecies. Florida proved that genetic rescue is a valid and necessary tool. It showed that biology is fluid, and that a species is a living, breathing thing that needs new input to survive. This has paved the way for similar projects around the world, from lions in Africa to tigers in India. Everywhere scientists see a small, isolated group of animals, they now point to Florida as the proof that you can hit the reset button on extinction. However, the success of the panther has led to a brand new set of challenges that are just as intense as the genetic crisis. When you bring back a top-tier predator, you have to find a place for them to live. Florida is one of the fastest-growing states in the country. Thousands of people move there every week. The empty forests aren't as empty as they used to be. This has created a new kind of frontier conflict. Panthers are now appearing in backyards, on golf courses, and near cattle ranches. The people of Florida have had to learn how to live with a predator that was once just a myth. This is the human factor of conservation. It's one thing to save a cat in a lab. It's another thing to convince 5 million neighbors to share their woods with it. The state responded by creating the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act. This is a massive bipartisan effort to link up 18 million acres of land across the state. It is perhaps one of the most significant environmental laws ever passed in the United States. It basically acknowledges that the panther is the umbrella species. By protecting enough land for a panther to roam, you aren't just saving the cat, you are saving the water, the birds, the deer, and the entire ecosystem that Florida depends on. The panther has become the ultimate environmental ambassador. It has united developers, ranchers, and environmentalists in a way that almost nothing else could. They all realized that a Florida without the panther is a Florida that is losing its soul. One of the most insane parts of the panther's return is the effect they have on the local deer and hog populations. In the years when the panthers were gone, the wild hog population in Florida went through the roof. These hogs are incredibly destructive. They tear up the soil, ruin crops, and outcompete other animals. But as the panther numbers grew, they started doing their job. They are the natural check on the hogs. Scientists have found that in areas with high panther activity, the vegetation is actually healthier because the hogs are being kept under control. This is the cascade effect. One predator, brought back from the edge of nothing, is now repairing the physical structure of the Florida wild. Another fascinating discovery involves the panther's cultural memory. Biologists have observed that the new generations of panthers are teaching their cubs how to navigate the modern world. They are learning which fences can be jumped and which underpasses are the safest. They are adapting to the sound of cars and the presence of humans. They are becoming urban-adjacent apex predators. This level of intelligence and flexibility is a direct result of that genetic refresh. The Texas DNA brought with it a sense of broad-scale curiosity that the inbred Florida cats had lost. They are no longer just swamp cats. They are becoming Florida cats in the broadest sense. Wait until you hear about the northward push. For decades, the Caloosahatchee River was considered a hard boundary. No female panther had been seen north of that river since the early 70s. The population was stuck. It was like a biological wall. But a few years ago, trail cameras picked up something that made biologists scream with joy. A female panther with kittens on the north side of the river. This was the crossing of the Rubicon. It meant the population wasn't just growing vertically in density, it was moving horizontally across the map. The panthers are officially heading home to the forests of central and northern Florida. Every mile they move north is a victory for the project. There is also a deep DNA component to this that researchers are still studying. They are looking at epigenetic markers, basically how the Florida environment is switching on certain genes in the Texas descendants. Even though they have Texas blood, they are physically adapting to the Florida heat and the specific prey of the Everglades. Their fur is staying shorter, and their feet are remaining slightly broader for walking in the mud. This is evolution at high speed. It proves that a species isn't just about where its great-grandparents were from. It's about how its DNA interacts with the land it stands on right now. The new Florida panther is a biological masterpiece of adaptation. The cost of this project has been in the hundreds of millions when you factor in the land acquisitions and the infrastructure. But the return on investment is staggering. A healthy panther population acts as a natural quality control for the entire state's ecology. They are the sentinels. If the panthers are doing well, it means the water is clean, the prey is abundant, and the forests are connected. They are the canary in the coal mine for the entire southeastern United Kingdom. If we lose the panther, we are essentially saying that we have given up on the wild. But because Florida chose to fight, they have created a blueprint for the rest of the world. Let's talk about the rancher connection. This is one of the most surprising twists in the story. In the beginning, many cattle ranchers were terrified of the panther's return. They worried about their livestock and their livelihoods. But a unique partnership has formed. The state developed programs to compensate ranchers for any losses, and many ranchers realized that the panther is actually a protector of the range. By keeping the deer and hog populations at a manageable level, the panthers are helping the ranchers maintain the grass for their cattle. Some of the most important panther habitat in Florida is now on private ranch land. The grand alliance between the cowboy and the cat is one of the most heartwarming parts of this entire saga. The story of the 12 Panthers is also a story about the power of public will. Florida is a state that is often divided on many issues, but the Save the Panther movement has been a unifying force for 40 years. Whether it's children in schools collecting pennies or billionaire developers donating land for corridors, the Florida panther has a way of cutting through the noise. It is the mascot of the state's resilience. What Florida did next, after realizing they only had 12 cats, was decide that they weren't okay with a silent Everglades. They decided that the roar of the wild was worth the risk of a crazy genetic experiment. But we have to remember how close it came to being a different story. If they had waited or if they had shifted their focus to a different project, those 12 cats would have simply faded out. We would be talking about the Florida panther in the same way we talk about the dodo or the passenger pigeon, a tragic mistake of history. Instead, we are talking about a population that is pushing 250 and climbing. We are talking about kittens being born in forests where their ancestors haven't lived for 50 years. We are talking about a genetic renaissance. Scientists are now using next-generation sequencing to keep an eye on the population. They can identify almost every individual panther by the DNA they leave behind in their tracks or their waste. They have a family tree for the entire state. They know exactly how much Texas blood is in each cat and how the original Florida genes are holding up. This precision conservation allows them to intervene only when necessary. It's a hands-off approach that is powered by high-tech data. We have moved from the emergency room phase of the 90s to the long-term health phase of today. The insane part of what came back decades after the Texas release isn't just the cats themselves. It's the forest's reaction. There are species of birds and small mammals that are thriving because the panthers have stabilized the environment. The fear profile of the woods has returned. Animals are more alert, they move more, and they don't overgraze specific areas. This ecology of fear is a sign of a healthy, functioning planet. The silence that haunted the Everglades in the early 90s is gone. It has been replaced by the subtle, powerful presence of a predator that is finally back where it belongs. As we look to the future, the Florida panther faces a new highway of challenges. Climate change and rising sea levels are pushing the coastal habitats further inland, right where the new developments are being built. The battle for space is the next great chapter in this story. But if the last 30 years have shown us anything, it's that the panther is a world-class survivor. If they can survive a genetic collapse that left them with only 12 individuals, they can survive the challenges of a changing world, as long as we continue to give them the room they need to be wild. The lesson for the rest of the world is simple. Never count a species out. Biological dead ends can be turned into new beginnings if we are brave enough to try something radical. Florida showed that you don't have to be perfect to be successful. You just have to be willing to act before the clock hits zero. The 12 to 200 story is more than just a nature project. It's a manual for the future of life on Earth. It tells us that we have the power to fix the mistakes of the past, even the ones that are written in the DNA. The Florida panther is no longer a ghost. It is a living, breathing, clawing reality. It is a tawny shadow moving through the palmettos of the Big Cypress, a silent hunter in the Fakahatchee Strand, and a pioneer heading toward the hills of Ocala. What Florida did next wasn't just save a cat. They saved the very idea of the Wild South. They proved that even in a state of 20 million people, there is still room for a legend. The roaring success of the panther is a reminder that while extinction is forever, hope is even more durable, especially when it's backed by good science and a lot of heart. Thank you for exploring this incredible journey of biological rescue with us. The Florida panther is a mascot for what's possible when we refuse to let the silence win. It's a story of Texas travelers, Florida survivors, and a state that decided to bet on the wild. As the Panthers continue their march north, they are carrying the genes of a miracle with them. Every footprint they leave in the Florida mud is a signature of success, a proof that the empty forests don't have to stay that way. Keep watching the shadows because the king of the swamp isn't just back, he's just getting started. The world is a much better place with the roar of the panther in it, and we are lucky to be here to witness the greatest comeback in the history of the American wilderness.